You didn't attract a toxic person once. You attracted the same toxic person with a different face. 3 times, 5 times, maybe more than you want to admit. Different name, different city, different job, same arguments, same feeling of walking on eggshells, same moment where you looked in the mirror and thought, how did I end up here again? And the most terrifying part isn't that it happened, it's that some part of you saw it coming. Stay with that. Today I'm going to tell you something that most psychology channels won't say directly, because it's uncomfortable, and uncomfortable doesn't get clicks, but it gets results. And what I'm going to tell you is this: you are not a victim of bad luck. You are a student of a very old lesson you haven't learned yet. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the pattern keeps repeating, what's actually driving it at the neurological and psychological level, and, most importantly, what it looks like when you finally break it. This is not about blaming yourself. This is about seeing yourself. And seeing yourself clearly is the most dangerous thing you can do. Dangerous to every toxic dynamic that has ever tried to take root in your life. Let's get into it. Here's a concept that changed everything for me, and for a lot of people I've talked to who've broken these cycles. It's called the familiarity principle, and in psychology, it's sometimes called the mere exposure effect, first documented by Robert Zajonc in 1968. The principle is simple. We are drawn to what we recognize, not what is good for us, not what is healthy, not what treats us with dignity. What we recognize. Your brain, specifically your nervous system, has been taking notes since you were a child. It has cataloged what love looks, sounds, and feels like. It has built an entire internal template. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. If the love you experienced early in your life was chaotic, if affection came with strings attached, if approval was conditional, if care was mixed with criticism or absence or unpredictability, your nervous system didn't file that under trauma. It filed it under normal. It filed it under love. So when you meet someone calm, consistent, reliable, emotionally available, someone who treats you like a fully formed human being from day one, something in your body says, this feels weird. This feels boring. I don't feel anything. And when you meet someone who keeps you guessing, who pulls you in and then withdraws, who has that edge, that intensity, that volatility, something in your body says, this feels familiar. This feels like home. And that feeling, that pull, you call it chemistry. You call it attraction. You call it a spark. But I want you to sit with this question, and I mean really sit with it. What if your spark is a trigger? What if what you've been calling chemistry is your nervous system recognizing a pattern it was trained to navigate? John Bowlby, one of the most important psychologists of the 20th century, developed what's called attachment theory. You've probably heard of it. Secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment. But here's the part most explainers skip over. Your attachment style isn't just about how you love, it's about what you accept. If you developed an anxious attachment style, meaning early caregivers were inconsistent, sometimes present, sometimes distant, sometimes loving, sometimes cold, you learned that love requires effort, that you have to earn it, that you are always one misstep away from losing it. People with anxious attachment don't just fall for emotionally unavailable partners. They pursue them because the chase feels like love. The anxiety feels like caring deeply. The relief of finally receiving affection feels like fireworks. If you developed an avoidant attachment style, meaning early caregivers were overwhelming or intrusive, or your emotional needs were minimized, you learned that closeness is threatening, that vulnerability gets punished, that self-sufficiency is survival. People with avoidant attachment don't just attract clingy or controlling partners. They unconsciously create that dynamic, pulling away until someone chases harder, then feeling suffocated, then pulling away again. And if you developed disorganized attachment, sometimes called fearful avoidant, you got the worst of both worlds. You crave intimacy and fear it simultaneously. You want someone who can love you, and you also believe, somewhere deep, that love means being hurt. Here's what all three have in common. The wound does the choosing, not you. Not the rational, thoughtful, self-aware version of you that watches videos like this one and knows better. The wound. The 7-year-old who learned what safety feels like, or doesn't feel like. And the wound picks partners based on pattern recognition, not logic. Freud got a lot wrong, but he got one thing profoundly right. He called it repetition compulsion. The unconscious tendency to repeat painful or unresolved experiences from the past. And I want you to understand why the brain does this, because when you understand the why, you stop feeling crazy. Your brain is a problem-solving machine. It is relentlessly, compulsively oriented toward completion. If something happened to you that was never resolved, a relationship with a parent who was cold or absent or critical, a dynamic where you never got the approval or the love or the acknowledgement you needed, your brain doesn't just file it away, it keeps the case open, and then it looks for opportunities to solve it. So it finds you a partner who resembles the unresolved figure, not in appearance, in feeling, in the emotional texture of the dynamic. And some deep part of your brain thinks, consciously or not, maybe this time I can get it right. Maybe this time I'll finally be enough. Maybe this time they'll choose me, and it will finally heal the wound. This is why you work twice as hard in relationships that are bad for you. This is why you stay longer than you should. This is why, when they finally do give you a crumb of affection, it feels like a feast. You're not chasing them, you're chasing resolution. And I'll tell you the hardest truth about repetition compulsion. It never works. You cannot heal a childhood wound through an adult relationship with someone who doesn't actually have the emotional capacity to give you what you needed. You can replay the dynamic 1,000 times, and the ending will never change, because they are not the person who hurt you. They just carry the same wound-shaped energy. The resolution doesn't come from them finally giving you what you need. It comes from you recognizing what you've been trying to do and choosing differently. Let me walk you through the most common toxic patterns people repeat, not to diagnose you, but to give your experience a name. Because when something has a name, it loses some of its power over you. Pattern 1. The emotionally unavailable partner. They are brilliant, magnetic, fascinating. They open up just enough to give you hope, and then they disappear, emotionally, sometimes physically, and you spend enormous energy trying to reach them, trying to be worthy of their full presence. Root wound. A caregiver who was physically present but emotionally absent. Love was rationed. Attention had to be earned. What you're unconsciously trying to prove. I am worth showing up for. Pattern 2. The controlling partner. They start intense. They call it passion. They frame jealousy as love, possessiveness as protection. Slowly, or sometimes quickly, the world gets smaller. Your friendships, your autonomy, your voice. Root wound. Chaos, unpredictability. A home where control was the only thing that felt like safety, or a caregiver who modeled that love equals ownership. What you're unconsciously trying to prove. This time, the intensity means safety, not danger. Pattern 3. The narcissistic partner. Charming beyond belief at the start. You've never felt so seen, so chosen, so special. Then, slowly, the idealization becomes devaluation. You are never quite enough. Your perception of reality starts to shift. You begin apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Root wound. A caregiver whose love was conditional on your performance, your compliance, or your role in managing their emotions. You learn to make yourself small, or to be the best, to survive. What you're unconsciously trying to prove: my worth is real. Someone will see it. Pattern 4. The fixer dynamic. You always choose someone who needs saving, someone with potential, someone who, if they could just get it together, with your help, your patience, your love, would be incredible. Root wound. A role reversal in childhood. You took care of a parent emotionally. Love became synonymous with being needed. You learned that your value is in your function, not your existence. What you're unconsciously trying to prove: if I help enough, I will be loved enough. Which one resonated? Maybe more than one. They often overlap. Here's what's important. Every single one of these patterns started as a survival strategy. You adapted. You were brilliant at it. You survived a dynamic that required enormous skill. The problem is that the skill that saved you then is sabotaging you now. People always say, "How did you not see the red flags?" And here's my answer. They saw them. They saw every single one. But here's the thing about red flags when you have an unresolved wound. They don't register as danger. They register as familiar. The intensity? You called it passion. The unpredictability? You called it keeping things interesting. The hot and cold behavior? You called it complicated, layered, misunderstood. The way they needed to be the center of everything? You called it confidence. The way they put you down subtly, in public, in private? You called it honesty. You called it them pushing you to be better. And the clincher, the one that keeps people stuck longer than anything else, the intermittent reinforcement. This is the most psychologically potent tool a toxic dynamic has. And it doesn't even have to be intentional. Sometimes it just is what it is. Intermittent reinforcement is the random, unpredictable delivery of reward. And behavioral psychology has proven, across decades of research, that intermittent reinforcement creates stronger attachment than consistent reward. This is why slot machines are more addictive than salary. This is why an occasionally loving partner is harder to leave than a consistently terrible one. This is why, even now, some of you are defending the person you're thinking about, because they were good times, real ones, and your brain clings to them the way a shipwrecked person clings to driftwood. The problem isn't that the good times weren't real. The problem is that they were unpredictable, and your nervous system was trained to survive, even thrive, in unpredictable emotional emotions. Okay, I need you to breathe for a second, because I know some of this has been hard to sit with. It's supposed to be. Not to make you feel bad, but because clarity always feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. Here's where we turn the corner. Understanding why the pattern exists is not the same as being trapped in it. In fact, the moment you can see the pattern from the outside, you are already partially free of it. The pattern only has full power when it's invisible. When you believe it's just who you are, just your luck, just what love feels like. The moment you can name it, trace it, feel where in your body it lives, that's the beginning of something new. So let's talk about what breaking the pattern actually looks like. Not in a platitude, not in a feel-good Instagram caption. In a real, neurological, psychological, behavioral way. Step 1. Stop pathologizing your attraction. Start getting curious about it. When you feel that pull, that spark, that instant intensity, your new response is not shame, it's not suppression, it's curiosity. Ask, what specifically is pulling me? What does this person remind me of? What dynamic is this activating? You're not diagnosing them, you're tracking yourself. Because your attraction is data. It's not a verdict on who you should be with. It's information about where you still have unresolved material. Step 2. Recalibrate what feels safe. Here's one of the most concrete pieces of advice you'll ever hear about breaking toxic relationship patterns. Learn to tolerate feeling bored by healthy people. That sounds brutal, I know, but this is real. When you first start encountering emotionally available, consistent, respectful partners, they will feel flat to you. Not because they're boring, because your nervous system hasn't learned to read their signals as exciting. Security feels unfamiliar when you were raised on chaos. Your job is not to force attraction. Your job is to stay curious long enough for your nervous system to learn that safety and love can coexist. Give it longer than 3 dates before you decide there's no spark. Ask, is there no spark or is there no chaos? Those are not the same thing. Step 3. Do the somatic work, not just the intellectual work. Most people try to break these patterns through understanding alone. And understanding is important. We've done a lot of it today, but it is not sufficient. These patterns live in the body, in the nervous system, not just in the mind, which means you need embodied practices, therapy, specifically somatic therapy or EMDR or IFS, breathwork, nervous system regulation, movement. You need to teach your body that it is safe to be calm, that security doesn't mean emptiness, that you can be still and be okay. Step 4. Grieve what you never got. This is the one people skip. It's the most important one. At some point, you have to stop trying to get what you needed from the wrong source, and you have to let yourself grieve that you didn't get it at all. Grieve the parent who wasn't available. Grieve the love you deserved and didn't receive. Grieve the version of yourself that spent years working twice as hard for half the love. Not to stay in grief, but to complete it. Because ungrieved wounds become the engine of repetition compulsion. When you actually let yourself feel the loss, not intellectually understand it, but feel it, the compulsion starts to lose its grip. You stop needing someone else to finally give you what you needed. You start being able to give it, in part, to yourself, and you stop accepting substitutes. Step 5. Redefine your identity. This is where we end. Because here's the thing. Most people try to change their relationship patterns without changing their story about themselves. And the story matters. If your story is, I'm someone who always attracts the wrong people, you will keep auditioning for that role. Identity is self-fulfilling. But if your story becomes, I'm someone who is learning to see clearly, someone who is becoming psychologically aware enough to choose differently, someone who the old pattern can no longer fool, that is a different story, and it leads to a different life. I want to leave you with one image. Imagine a version of you, not perfect, not healed in some sterile clinical sense, but awake, aware. A version of you who, when they feel that old familiar pull, catches it before it catches them. A version of you who can sit across from someone and feel the intensity and think, I see what this is. I see why I'm drawn to it. And I choose differently. Not because that person wasn't compelling, not because you've become emotionally closed off, but because you know yourself now. You know your patterns. You know your wounds. And you've done enough work that those wounds don't have the steering wheel anymore. That version of you is psychologically dangerous. Not dangerous to people who love you well. Dangerous to every dynamic that used to hold you. Every pattern that used to pass itself off as love. Every relationship that fed on your confusion, your self-doubt, your desperate hope that this time would be different. You become dangerous to cycles that can no longer survive your clarity. That is what we're building here. That is who you are becoming. And the fact that you watched this video, sat with the discomfort, didn't click away when it got hard, tells me you're closer than you think. If this landed for you, share it. Not for the algorithm, because someone in your life is in a pattern right now and doesn't have the words for it yet. Give them the words. I'll see you there.